So, Daniel chapter 1, new series in Daniel. A book that I'm looking forward to getting into, although I gotta say, when we get to chapter 7 onwards, it does get a little bit more interesting. I think some of those visions are maybe way over my head, but we'll see how we do. We'll get to chapter 7 and then see what happens after that. By way of a little bit of introduction, though, Daniel is a unique book because Daniel actually isn't written all in Hebrew. The Old Testament, pretty much 99% of it's written in Hebrew. Daniel is one of those unique books where it's not written all in Hebrew. Chapter 1 and chapters 8 onwards are in Hebrew, but chapters 2 to 7 are in Aramaic. That's just a wee aside. But it was written as a historic document of what happened when the Israelites were in exile. If you remember, we're looking at the story of Jonah and what's going to happen to them and all the whole allusion to Israel being taken captive by Babylon, the sea monster, if you remember that. He's likened to a sea monster. They take their eyes off the Lord one too many times and they don't heed his warnings, and so the Lord sends the Babylonians in to wipe them out, and they take, as you see at the start of the book, they take stuff from the temple and they take people from the land and they bring them into captivity in Babylon. This is their punishment for taking their eyes off the Lord. So it's written as an account of what happened, but it also is written to help encourage people in exile. It's written to encourage people who are strangers in a foreign land that isn't their own, teaching them to take a stand for the Lord, knowing that the Lord is with his people. And we'll see that throughout, and you know the stories from your Sunday school lessons and holiday Bible clubs and whatever, of Daniel and his friends and all that. You'll see how the Lord is with those people who take a stand for him, and that salvation is coming for those who stand firm. So that's one of the reasons why the book was written. Now, before we get to the book, it's important to note actually in it, there's a recurring theme in the book of Daniel of beasts. Okay, and we're going to see this in a wee second. There are beasts within Daniel, and beasts are contrasted to sort of beasts being the seed of the serpent, and then you have the seed of the woman. You know, in Genesis in the garden, God says to the serpent, "Your seed, and you know the seed of the woman will crush your head, and his seed will bite your heel," and all that. That's sort of being played out here with the theme of beasts, and we're going to have a look at that at one point as well. Because we'll see later on, Nebuchadnezzar, he becomes like a beast, like a wild beast later on. So bear that in mind when we get to that point. So chapter 1, let's just go through it, but read a few verses anyway. So verse 1, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And like I said, this is judgment from the Lord because of their disobedience. They kept sinning, they're getting their just deserts. They're getting what the Lord told them would happen. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into Nebuchadnezzar's hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Now, it says Babylonia there. The place is called Shinar. That's what it is in the Hebrew. And it's the place where Babylon was. That's why it's called Babylonia. But if you're in Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel was built in the land of Shinar as well. And that's important in a sense because if you remember, and maybe I've said it before, I think I have a few times, the Tower of Babel is actually the Tower of Babylon. We call it the Tower of Babel. It's translated as the Tower of Babel, but in the Hebrew, the word for Babel is the same word right throughout the Old Testament used for Babylon. It's only changed to Babel in Genesis 11. So it's the Tower of Babylon. Shinar is where Babylon is. It's where that tower was that they built or started to build to get up to the heavens. And so what you see in verse 2 is that God's temple is raided. The artifacts are taken from there and put into possibly, according to scholars, that Tower of Babel in Babylon, where they tried to make a name for themselves. So it's taken out of God's temple and it's put into the temple of the Babylonian god there in Shinar. Verse 3, the king ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand, qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. So these young men are from the royal family, it says in verse 3. So these are from the line of King David, okay? Because of the royal family. They're David's line that's been brought in here. And the English doesn't do the text justice. Not only are some of the artifacts from the temple taken, but also it says in the Hebrew, where it says some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, the actual word in the Hebrew is the word zerah, which is the word for seed. Because seed is so important in the Old Testament. In Genesis, it talks about the serpent, and your seed will strike the woman's heel, and her seed will crush the serpent's head. So they've taken some of the seed, the royal seed, and because seed is important, this is the royal line. If these guys die, what is the future of Israel? And so as you're reading this, you're thinking, you're to be on the edge of your seat here. These are the royal seed. This is the future of Israel here, and now they're taken captive into Babylon. So what's going to happen? Now, if you look at verse 4, is it verse 4? Yes. These are young men who have no physical defect, pleasing to the eye and full of wisdom, is what it says in the Hebrew. So there's no physical defect, they're pleasing to the eye, and they're full of wisdom. Now, you might make a wee link there, because if you look at Genesis 3 in the Garden of Eden, let me read Genesis 3 verse 6. When the woman saw that the fruit of the seed was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she gave some to her husband, who took it and ate with her. Okay? So we're transported right back to the Garden of Eden here with these words that the author of Daniel is using here. These men are, in a sense, this royal seed is forbidden fruit. Pleasing to the eye. Desirable or full of wisdom. So these royal seed are forbidden fruit that are taken by the Babylonians. And also in the Garden of Eden, like I said, it's Eve's seed that will crush the serpent's head. Verse 15 of Genesis 3, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, you will strike his heel. Offspring, the word offspring is the same word, zerah, it's seed. So the royal seed has been taken from the land and planted in Babylon, but it is a seed that's the future of Israel, like I said. So you're to be thinking, what's going to happen to Israel now? Verse 5. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table, and they were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. So these people are to eat the king's food, choice food and wine, the best of the best here. And they were to be trained for 3 years and then be of service to the king, a foreign king who'd essentially kidnapped them and forced them to work for him. And among those, verse 6, were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief gave them new names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah, Shadrach, Mishael, Meshach, and Azariah, Abednego. And interestingly, Daniel's name is changed from God as my judge, Daniel, to may the king's life be protected. His whole identity is being changed, or at least they're trying to change his identity here. It's an anti-Hebrew identity. No longer God is my judge, but may I protect the king of Babylon. But Daniel stands up to this. Look at verse 8. Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. So, according to one of the scholars I looked at, here's what's happening here, which I think is very fascinating. Daniel is the royal seed, future of Israel. He's a human being taken and being planted in Babylon. He's his forbidden fruit, pleasing to the eye, full of wisdom, just like the fruit in the Garden of Eden. And he's been plucked from Israel by the king of Babylon. So in a sense, the king of Babylon has taken the fruit, the forbidden fruit from Israel, and brought it into Babylon. Daniel, though, he is not going to do the same thing, because if you think of the food that the king offers him, that's kind of forbidden food, not fruit, but forbidden food, okay? Probably been offered to idols, sacrificed and prayed over and stuff like that to idols. So he won't take the forbidden food. So you've got a contrast. The king of Babylon has taken this forbidden fruit, this royal seed, brought it to Babylon, but Daniel won't do that. He won't eat the forbidden food to him. So the king of Babylon will take what doesn't belong to him, like the human beings in page 1 of the Bible. But these people in Daniel 1, Daniel won't eat the forbidden food. And so he becomes like a new Adam here. This is the whole point, apparently, of what the author's trying to convey. This is a new Adam, and we've done this before in looking at other passages in the Old Testament. The author of the Old Testament, the way the Lord's inspired people, you have this promise in Genesis 3 that the seed of the woman is going to crush the serpent's head. And as you read the Old Testament, every time you meet one of the main characters, you are to think in some ways, is this the person that's going to be the one to crush the serpent's head? Is this the new Adam? So you have Noah's like that. And you see that with the ark, and then there's a redo of creation. He's now new start, new Adam. Is he the one? Then you realize, no, it's not him. Moses, through the Red Sea, rescue from Egypt, through the Red Sea, new start, like the baptism, the waters of baptism in a sense, comes through that, through the waters of death, out the other side, new start. Maybe Moses is the one to be this new Adam. Maybe he's the serpent crusher. And of course, you realize he's not. Of course, it goes on throughout the Old Testament. You realize that Jesus is the one to do that. But they don't know that. When you're reading the Old Testament, they don't know that. So Daniel here, again, is being, okay, maybe he's your new Adam. That's what you're to think. And there's lots of sort of links to the Genesis. Maybe he's the new Adam. Because this guy, Daniel, doesn't do what Adam did. Daniel doesn't eat the forbidden food. He stands up, he says, no, I'm not going to do that. So look at what happens. Daniel, look at verse 9. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. And the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than any other young man of your age? The king would have my head because of you. Daniel said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servant for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate their foods. So look at verse 12 here, okay? Daniel says, give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. And do you know what the word used in the Hebrew for vegetables is there? It is the same word, zera, seed, okay? Give us seed, or it's the plural of that anyway. Give us seeds, or seed-bearing plants, as some translations might say, okay? Give us seed-bearing plants. Now, if you look at seed-bearing plants, there's somewhere else where it mentions seed-bearing plants. If you go back to Genesis, in fact, turn to Genesis, keep your finger in Daniel, turn to Genesis 1. Because here's how you can really tell that Daniel is likened to Adam. He wants to be the ideal, in a sense. He's being the ideal person that Adam wasn't. So Genesis 1, look at verse 27. Genesis 1. God created, verse 27, mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves along the ground. Now in verse 29, then God said to the mankind, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, they will be yours for food. That's what Daniel's asking for. Verse 30, and to all the beasts of the earth, and the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, and everything else that has the breath of life in it, look at that, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. So the first humans were to eat the seed-bearing plants, which is what Daniel's asking for. It's exactly the same words in Daniel as it is in Genesis, okay? Daniel wanted to do that, and the author is transporting us back to Eden. Daniel is another version of Adam, but he's a version of Adam that actually does what he's supposed to do. Again, like I said, this new Adam thing is all over the Old Testament. But what are the rest of the people doing? They're eating the king's food. They're not eating vegetables. They're eating meat, generally. Now, if you notice in Genesis 1:30, the beasts of the field aren't supposed to eat meat. They're supposed to eat green plants. Did you notice that? It's only after the fall that the beasts of the field start tearing each other apart. Okay? So that's a result of the fall. Fallen animals behave like these beasts, because before the fall, the beasts of the field were perfect. They were good. God saw that it was good. Yeah? So it's after the fall, these beasts act like beasts. They tear each other apart. You only have to see a nature program to see how lions and whatever attack things and tear them apart. So if you think about, and I suppose the author's trying to get your imagination going here, if you're eating food, think of like eating a chicken drumstick. You're grabbing it maybe with your hand and ripping the meat off the bone. You're being like a beast. You're tearing flesh from the bone. So these guys who are eating the king's food are acting like beasts of the field. Fallen beasts of the field. And Daniel is saying here, I don't want to be like that. I want to be like the good Adam should have been in Eden. Just give me vegetables. Let me do what the Lord originally planned, and let's see if I end up better than all these people here acting like fallen beasts. You see that? And we get a snippet of what happens to Daniel and his friends. Look at verse 17. To these four young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kind of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dream dreams of all kinds. And at the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar, and he talked with them, and he found none equal to them. And they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his kingdom. So Daniel's now in a position to serve the king, but also Daniel now can bring the presence of Yahweh right into a place where the presence of Yahweh had never been welcomed before. Do you see that? God had used this situation and used Daniel to bring his presence right into the heart of Babylon. And it's a timely reminder for us to take that stand for the Lord and do what is right, even when it might cost you your life, and it's a theme throughout Daniel. So Daniel was being like Adam should have been, and he was blessed for it. And so will we if we take a stand for the Lord. Now, some people have been martyred for their faith, but they will be blessed. Their blessing is in eternity. We might not get our blessing in this life. There's a prosperity gospel going out there saying that the Lord's going to bless you in this life, and he does very much so. We don't realize how blessed we are when you think of other parts of the world. But when we take a stand for the Lord and when we do what's right, our blessings, we might get martyred for it. Probably not in this country, but people have. But those blessings they haven't forfeited their blessings. Their blessings are being experienced for eternity in heaven.